Hi, everyone. Welcome to Informed Dissent, a news podcast that brings you dispatches from the gender culture war. I am Ben Appel, the author of Cis White Gay, The Making of a Gender Heretic, and I'm here with my co-hosts, author and journalist Lisa Sellen Davis, gender clinic whistleblower and co-executive director of LGBT Courage Coalition, Jamie Reed, a gentleman of trans experience, Corey Cohn. The writer and researcher, Sarah Mittermeier, is out of town. She will hopefully be rejoining us next week. A few headlines. The Loudoun County Public Schools in Virginia, that drama that went on with the trans-identified girl recording the boys in the high school locker room, it seems like it concluded the Title IX investigation. The boys did actually get a 10-day suspension and a no contact order with the girl. And they also have to meet with school administrators to determine a quote corrective action plan, end quote. So yeah, gender identity won in that situation. From the BBC's reporting, a lot of people, I've tweeted about this, a lot of people have. In Germany, there was a reported neo-Nazi sentenced to a year and 6 months in prison. He is notorious in Germany, and Germany's Self-Determination Act, which had just come into force after he was convicted, allows people to change their gender marker and first name through a simple declaration at a registry office instead of a judicial ruling. So after he was convicted, he changed his legal sex to female, and so now he will serve. The chief public prosecutor is saying he's going to serve in a women's prison. On Wednesday, the New York Times reported on a Justice Department subpoena recently published in court documents that the department had sent to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia in June, requesting, quote, every writing or record of whatever type, end quote, made by doctors regarding gender affirming care, as well as the patient's birth dates, social security numbers and addresses, and text messages, emails, and voicemail records. And it looks, they're doing investigating for evidence of insurance fraud, essentially, fraud. The CBC reports that the British Columbia nurse Amy Ham has been suspended and asked to pay nearly $94,000 in costs for making, quote, discriminatory and derogatory statements, end quote, about trans people.
Is that the court? Is she being shouldered with all of the court fees for
Yeah,
okay, that's
so
what I thought.
and she's appealing, and so she was accused of, this is the British Columbia nurse that was accused of unprofessional conduct, in the story the CBC says while identifying as a nurse. She is a nurse,
What?
so it's funny they just use that language anyway. Um, uh, uh, this is the British Columbia College of Nurses and Midwives that accused her of this. In 2021, Ham learned that she was being investigated after she co-sponsored a billboard in 2021 in Vancouver that just read "I heart J.K. Rowling." The examples that the CBC gave in the article about the derogatory, discriminatory speech that Ham uses is that she calls trans women men in social media posts, videos, and podcasts, expressing her concern for women's and girls' safety. She has tweeted, quote, "We have eyeballs and we will continue to use them to misgender you," end quote, and has suggested adults who identify as non-binary are making, quote, "an extremely embarrassing display of narcissism and low intelligence," end quote. Um, yeah, so that's ongoing. Washington Post reports, this is the last one. The suspects of the July 4th attack outside of the Texas ICE facility are, quote, tied to trans anti-fascist activism, end quote. This was really interesting. A SWAT team conducted a raid of a Dallas house in like a predominantly Black and Latino neighborhood, that was occupied by about six white trans-identified males. And they were part of a group of activists who initially united around trans and queer identity issues, it says. And so the raid was part of an investigation into the July 4th attack outside the Prairieland ICE detention facility in Alvarado, Texas. Federal prosecutors say, quote, "the suspects set off fireworks and spray painted staff vehicles just after 10:30 p.m., then unloaded up to 30 rounds of gunfire, wounding a police officer in the neck," end quote. And then 11 people have been charged, attempted murder and terrorism related offenses, and at least three others with aiding their escape or concealing evidence. So yeah, those are the headlines. I do a weekly newsletter for paid subscribers every week. There was a lot of meaty news this week. Anyway, um, so please subscribe because you'll get that delivered to your inbox every Friday at 4 p.m. Um, and yeah, today we're going to talk about what are we talking about? We're talking about the McMaster University.
Can we talk first about how I've missed you all?
Oh,
Can I just
yes,
say
we can
that?
talk about that. Go for it,
Okay.
Jamie.
I miss you all. I have a hard time processing the news these days if I don't get to chat with you all to do so. So I'm just glad that we're back. Although I miss Sarah, but
Yeah, me
she's
too.
off gallivanting on vacation still.
So because we were on vacation for a couple weeks at the beginning of August, and then a number of us were continued. It was just Corey and me last
Last
week
week.
with which was a great. We had I mean we did what that was a really interesting conversation we had with the psychiatrist Dr. Lauren Schwartz. It was fun. But yeah, it has been a while since we've seen each other, so
Yeah.
it is good to be back.
Yeah.
So yeah, the McMaster University conducted systematic reviews of the evidence regarding there are two reviews, one on puberty blockers and one on cross-sex hormones. I think they were both for
Oh,
under 20.
great. Jamie, but maybe Jamie should take this because
Oh,
she's
good. Yeah, please do it. Please do it, Jamie. So
involved.
anyway, we're going to talk about that. Jamie's going to explain a more concise, coherent, and complete version of
Let's
the
see
issue.
if I can try.
Okay.
Um, SEGM, the Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine, commissioned a series of systematic reviews from McMaster's University in Hamilton, Canada, which, if you look up on the map, Hamilton hangs out near Niagara Falls. So to me, it feels way like more New York, like kind of it's close, I don't know, to y'all than like way up there in North Canada. Um, McMaster's University is the home of Gorit, no, Gordon Guyatt, who is basically, I think, retired, but is known as the father of evidence-based medicine, harkening way back to the 90s. I think that he kind
80s even. I've
of,
been reading about the early days and people were
yeah, he
talking about it.
coined that term way back. So SEGM paid and signed a contract. I think this is relevant with McMaster
Hmm.
to do a systematic review of evidence on 5 different like domains. Puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and mastectomies were the 3 that have been published. 2 more have not been published. Um, Side note, I think in the contract, when SEGM paid for this, they essentially said to McMaster, no matter what you find, you publish. Like that was their agreement. So if they would have found glorious, high quality evidence of support, SEGM's paid contract was you publish it. If you find what you ended up finding, which was low quality evidence, then you publish that. This contract, I think, was 4 years ago. And so we're slowly seeing these publications, and 3 of them were published. And then there were 8 authors on these publications. 5 authors, but not the first author, has now signed on to a statement that was published on McMaster's University's website on August the 14th. So basically a week ago, this went up on their website. They had shopped this statement around to actual publications. Nobody wanted to pick it up. Nobody wanted to publish it. So that's why it was put out directly on the university's website. And then one more side note, which should probably go in the show notes, is that part of this is a response to an op-ed that was published in Hamilton, Canada's local newspaper on July. Ooh, I don't want to get this date wrong. It was published in July, and it was a fiery, very interesting piece of op-ed work. that actually I hear a whole bunch of people sent letters to try to get the op-ed corrected. And one of the errors in this op-ed, I think there's many, but one of the errors in the op-ed was that they were essentially, the four authors were saying that Ken Zucker actually was fired, and that they talk nothing about how he actually won his later lawsuit.
Who's
This
Ken
opinion,
Zucker?
yeah. The opinion piece is titled No Pride in Pseudoscience. It was published July 12th, and it is for individuals. An associate professor of poli-sci from McMaster's is one of the authors. A postdoc researcher in poli-sci who refuses to capitalize their first or last name from Alberta is one of the authors, and two family physicians. They claim that one of them is trans-identified, one of them has a trans child, and that they also work with trans-identified patients. But this op-ed started out with the statement, Pride parades commemorate the 1969 Stonewall riots, a rebellion against police harassment of queer and trans people.
Oh, goodness.
That was the opening statement in this. In addition, there's been an Instagram account that has been going after the McMaster's researchers, and there's been this social pressure campaign to get them to put out the statement that they did on the 14th. Okay. Does somebody else want to talk about the statement? Yeah.
Before you do that, you had said that the agreement with SEGM, which, by the way, is an organization that has people from all different political backgrounds and was dedicated to not being about politics, although I don't know how much they've stuck to that, but to just focusing on the science. And you stated that the agreement said you're going to publish these no matter what, which is the exact opposite of the WPATH agreement, which also commissioned evidence systematic reviews from Johns Hopkins Evidence-Based Medicine Center, and said you can only publish them if they advance the field of transgender health, if they make it look good. But what you didn't say was, what were the conclusions of these systematic reviews that were to be published no matter what? What did they?
Oh, yeah, they found low to very low quality evidence supporting the interventions. In the cross-sex hormones, they did find cardiovascular and other known medical risks as outcomes. And the one paper I'll admit I have not read was the mastectomy paper. And I believe that also was low to low quality evidence and also found known surgical risks of harm. I mean, all three that have been published were low to low quality evidence.
Which means what for people who?
Ooh, well, this is where the rub comes in, I think, a little bit, is the way that I view this is that we look at what is the problem that the intervention is trying to solve, and is there evidence to prove that it solves that problem? And I think part of our issue is that, do we all share the same definition of what the problem is that the intervention is trying to solve? And so what these were looking at was, do these interventions solve a problem of distress and mental health, this thing called dysphoria? Do these interventions solve that distress? And they were finding, no, there's no good quality evidence to show that it's solving the problem of the distress.
Could I ask Jamie? Because one of the criticisms that I hear about positions of evidence-based medicine, or positions of the critics of these interventions, is that you'll never get high quality evidence because you cannot do randomized controlled trials. You can't, there's no placebo for a mastectomy.
Well, you could still have groups, comparison groups. You can have higher quality. They're not comparing them to anybody.
Yeah, I mean,
So
Lisa's correct. I mean, you could have a comparison group where you have a group of kids who, I think the question becomes more, is it blinded in any way? You can't blind it. You can't blind like a double blind study would be where the
yeah,
researcher and the patient doesn't know who's getting what. Somebody's, why is
Well, that's where the drama comes in about that, Corey, right? Is because that's a big debate right now about possible puberty blocker studies that are being planned. I think in the UK,
yeah,
and then there's big debates over like there shouldn't even be these studies because we shouldn't be performing these experiments where we're blocking the puberty of some kids and the puberty of others. So really, we'll never. Some people think that we will never be able to and should never be able to conduct those types of studies that you're talking about. Am I right?
but
Well, there are a couple. I mean, there's the British study and the Dutch study. I mean, there have been a few studies. And then
But
there's also I was
sorry.
just reading the systematic review of puberty blockers that Sally Baxendale wrote, which shows, I mean, this is another big question. I put the cart before the horse here, but when there is low certainty evidence, we simply cannot be sure if we can trust the outcomes of the studies. We don't, it could be the opposite, it could be some version of it. It's impossible to know. And so you have to make decisions based on the evidence not telling you much. But there is more evidence of harm than I thought. So, for instance, in the cross-sex hormones study, in the puberty blocker systematic review, there was at least one person who became cognitively impaired after going on puberty blockers. Do we know causation? No, but and then in general, there were long-lasting negative effects of puberty blockers. It seemed to indicate. So there's some decent quality evidence of harm, and there's very low quality evidence of benefit. And what do you do with that information? What does a patient do with that information? What do politicians do with that information? What do activists do with that information? That's what we're arriving at, because activists were not happy that evidence, that the systematic reviews revealing this situation then became part of the reason for bans, part of the reason.
Can I add, because Lisa,
Yeah.
you gave a great list of what do you do if you're the parent? What if you do if you're this? I think we need to add to that list of what do you do if you're the researcher who finds out there's low quality evidence? Because I think that McMaster's endpoint was they put it out there for the public, and now that should be the end of their involvement, I think, in some ways. That they don't.
I agree with you on that completely. So what you're saying is because activists reacted and they said, "Oh," and it wasn't. I mean, yes, they were really concerned about what people were going to do with the information. It wasn't, to my knowledge, it didn't seem like people were necessarily disputing the systematic reviews themselves, although they were wary of the results because they were saying they were funded by this anti-LGBT hate group, like this quote unquote extremist group, which is how they refer to SEGM, which, by the way, but Southern Poverty Law Center does call a hate group. Anyway, so the response of McMaster and the researchers was to issue this long statement being like, we understand that we have we've heard the concerns of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community. We understand that people are really concerned about this. Here's a statement from the researchers. So Jamie, I think you were saying like they should just back away, and I agree. There never should have been a statement. They should have been like,
You were
okay,
done.
we understand that people are upset, but that's not our job. We're scientists, we're researchers. We just give you what we've discovered. We're apolitical. We don't have any involvement in this. The activist concern, which is always the case. It's like this with news media. It's like when you hear people like Chase Strangio and others talking about, oh my gosh, like you can't write this because this. How many times have they said court cases have used the New York Times articles as
Yes.
evidence in there, and it's like they just want nothing to come out so that the bad people, can't misuse it or abuse the information.
Okay. Why don't they go after the quote unquote bad people then? If they have a challenge, why did they go after McMaster's? Why didn't they go and do the actual finding out which orgs used this research in the testimony for bans? Why didn't they actually challenge?
Well,
They
you
do
you
that,
know why.
right?
Why?
Well, they're not making arguments about principle. This is all about power. They're not trying to convince us. You know, we talk over and over on here about how do we persuade people. They understand that their strategy is not about persuading us. They know that we can't be persuaded. Therefore, they are going to go after and attack the source of our credibility. It's just warfare.
Right. I mean, I think it's if they go after if they get McMaster to disavow it in some way, then it's harder to use the systematic reviews to defend bans. And they're looking at any way they can to poke holes in the bans or in the legitimacy of the arguments, and they can't poke holes in the systematic reviews themselves.
Mhm.
So they can poke holes in how they were used, and then they can uphold this designation of hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, which we understand how ridiculous that is. We understand the concept creep of hate, so that hate is disagreement. And we know that the Southern Poverty Law Center has for years sort of laundered its credibility. And, you know, by comparing this group of researchers who came to the politically incorrect conclusion to the KKK, to us, it's ridiculous. But to the general kind of New York Times reading public, that's enough. Oh, the SPLC labeled this a hate group, and they took money from a hate group to perform a systematic review. So they're trying to get at the credibility, since they can't get at the actual science.
And they got in the sense they got what they were hoping to do, which was for the university to sever ties with SEGM. So they concluded their statement by saying we will no longer accept funding from SEGM. And they also kind of like admitted guilt in a way by saying like, at the time we thought they were, just a neutral organization. We didn't really know or think that they were anti-trans in any way. And we understand how people have been hurt, and this shouldn't. And of course they do get political. They're like, this should in no way be used to change new policy, existing policy, etc. So they give their opinion about this. But it's kind of one of those things where they say like don't ever apologize, because it does make it worse for this department, because now the department has kind of admitted guilt. And so regardless of whether or not trans activists, and activists got what they wanted in terms of like them severing ties, maybe some people thinking that the credibility is, undermining the credibility of these studies, which I'm sure worked with a lot of people, like Lisa was just saying too, then this research department is forever going to be tainted, not forever, but for a good while going to be tainted as that bad research center. So kind of like anything else that comes out of this, likely what's going to happen is that it doesn't, to me, in my opinion, anything that they try to do in this area, they know what they're going to be up against, so they'll probably just end up not researching this anymore at all. That's
Oh,
what I
I
think.
think they won't. I think they won't participate in this issue anymore.
Yeah.
But they also in this statement, they also then link to various advocacy groups, and they pick a side.
They absolutely pick a side.
And if you look at the campaign against them, it's nasty. They're on this Instagram page of SEGM versus McMaster. SEGM _X_ McMaster is the Instagram site, and it has videos of these young people go accosting these researchers and saying, how can you have partnered with these people? Why are you harming trans children, etc. And they look just completely dumbfounded. They did not have any tools to respond to this, because it is a very odd way to respond to, you did a scientific study and I don't like the outcome. One is not used to people behaving like that, I think.
It's
They're
terrifying.
not. We are. So they didn't have the tools, and as Ben, to add to what Ben said, it's a shame that their response wasn't, the evidence is the evidence.
Yes, I mean, I guess I just don't have a lot of sympathy. Okay, you got accosted in the hallway. So then call security.
I do. I have sympathy a little bit because I mean, just think about the first time that you ran into that. Jamie, you're kind of near to it now. You've been in these situations so many times. You are a brave one that's very much out there. Corey, you are as well. For me, I don't I don't like those situations at all, and it's very disturbing. It's really it can be scary.
But I think that that's ignoring, I think that they had way more support and has, I think they've had way more conversations than they let on to the public, and they know more. Like these are not, I mean, okay, Gordon Guyatt has been talking about evidence-based medicine for decades. He has to have known, he's had to have been challenged in other ways around these things, and should know as a scientist how to just don't exceptionalize it, I guess is where I want to go. Don't exceptionalize it. Don't
Yeah.
like trans is something spectacularly different. If you're challenged scientifically on your evidence, he stands behind that evidence. Just say that.
I think there's something that does make this exceptional, though. So, Jamie,
Yes.
you at one point before you were on the path that you're on right now, there was a time where you had a lot of empathy for trans people. Not saying that you don't now, but that was like a major motivator for you, and you had a extremely close people in your life that were identified as trans that you wanted to protect, that you wanted to help. And some of these people may have the same thing. They might have family members. They might have very dear family friends that what they think of is all of these people are attacking them. They want to take away their rights. They want them to become second-class citizens. And what I am doing, helping to make that possible. Am I betraying people who I love by enabling the types of groups that are putting forth legislation that curtails the rights of people who I know and love? Like, that's what makes it exceptional. If it's about any other medical question, then it's contained in that medical field. But as soon as it starts having personal significance for you because it affects the people that you know, it changes it. It is exceptional.
Well, Jamie, can I say something, or are you about to?
No, yeah, I'm just
okay. I didn't know if you were. I think that Gordon Guyatt is not exceptionalizing it. And so when he first spoke 2 years ago or three, I forget, at the SEGM conference, I think it was the first semi-public SEGM conference, which, I was allowed to attend. And he gave a presentation about evidence-based medicine, and he, to walk people through it who don't know about it, it sort of starts with doing systematic reviews or meta-analyses or other ways of, like, let's figure out what the best available evidence is. It's a way to make decisions, right? And if I understand this right, if the evidence is low or very low certainty, you also prioritize clinician knowledge or medical consensus, and as well as, and I had thought there was a hierarchy, but I might be wrong, but as well as patient values and preferences, and which include patient autonomy and these other medical ethics, which Jamie can talk in more detail about. And I'll just finish up by saying that what Gordon Guyatt said then was the evidence is low certainty. There is no medical consensus. So therefore, we revert to patient values and preferences. So there was never anything in what he said to therefore ban it. There wasn't a fourth, therefore ban it. And in fact, the majority, I believe, of medical procedures have low certainty evidence. And so what's missing and what should be part of the values and preferences is the ethical component, and how you make a decision, how you have values and preferences, if people are not honest about the first two parts, about the low certainty evidence, what we know and what we don't know, and about the utter lack of consensus and all that we miss by making this about politics instead of science and ethics. So we're asking him
Yes.
to actually treat this differently, because it's about children, because we don't know what we're treating, because we don't have any definition of harm, because we don't have a definition of success. There are all of these other issues. So we're saying in this case, we can't just say, well, what do you guys want and what do you value? And we respect your autonomy, but part of our job as clinicians is to help you exercise autonomy by understanding it in depth, et cetera. None of this is happening. So I think the upset is that Gaia isn't exceptionalizing it.
I want to try an analogy, and I might be shooting myself in the foot. I'm just going to admit I haven't read I've never PubMed this and read papers about this, but I keep having this weird analogy pop into my head. I do not have my tonsils or my adenoids. Have any of you also had your tonsils or adenoids removed? No? Corey?
You can't tell from my pronouns?
Just be serious for a minute. Did you ever have your tonsils or adenoids removed?
No.
Okay. So when I was born in 1980, I had my tonsils and adenoids removed probably in second or third grade because I had repeated strep infections. Over and over, kept having strep infections. I went to the hospital. I remember I had a surgery. I had these body parts removed in the belief that it would reduce, I think the thing that it was trying to do was reduce the number of strep infections. Speed up to I'm now a parent and I have a 15-year-old. Around the same age, he had repeated strep infections. My thought was, okay, so we're going to get his tonsils removed. And I'm informed by the clinician at this time, we don't have good evidence anymore to do this. And we don't really go to this anymore. The threshold has now changed. You actually have to have, and it was like, I think it was, God, this is where I'm going to get it wrong, but I think it was something like 10 repeated infections within a calendar year. And also, insurance will no longer cover this because the evidence doesn't support its use except in these like tiny extreme cases. Okay. So we see this intervention that was used often in probably my age cohort. Was there risk? Absolutely. I was put under sedation. I had otherwise healthy tissue removed. But the evidence in the long-term studies was found that it did not reduce or solve the problem that this procedure was looking to do. And it was just phased out. The insurance stepped away, the clinicians learned, and they stopped doing it. There was never, ever a 501c3 formed to remove children's tonsils and to keep removing tonsils. And clinicians led the way by the continued reflective look at the evidence. They did not go to, there could be a values and preference argument for a parent. I might value that it's really annoying that my kid had strep 8 times that year and missed school and I had to miss work and he kept being sick. Maybe, I could say I had a value in having this procedure offered to my kid, but it wasn't even on the table. Like, I think that's where I get frustrated with this idea that it's a value and a preference, because the clinicians had removed it as an option for me because of the evidence.
And that might be a fair way for clinicians, those who make guidelines, to respond to this, right? Not evidence alone, because so many procedures have low certainty evidence and we don't ban them or we don't take them all off the table. We weigh them against all those benefits and risks and all kinds of other things and what are the alternatives. But it certainly could have made sense to look at these systematic evidence reviews and be like, whoa, it turns out we don't have good evidence. And, oh, we have more detransitioners than we thought. And, oh, we used to be treating gender dysphoria and now we there are so many other things that could have led to at the very least revising guidelines so it said we can only have very weak recommendations for these because we don't have the science to say that this is evidence-based and life-saving medically necessary care. And of course, that never happened. None of those medical associations or group advocacy groups that created quote unquote guidelines ever took these systematic reviews with or without any of those other things I just brought up and said, yeah, we got to adjust here. Like we are having like strong recommendations with weak evidence and some people are getting hurt. They just dug in completely and co-opted the terms evidence-based, medically necessary, and life-saving in ways that they had no evidence for any of using those terms.
Okay, but so in those kind of so Gordon says we pivot to values and preferences. I still think that that's taking away what the clinician's role is supposed to be. We don't expect parents to read these papers and any other, I expect my clinician to be keeping abreast of the field. What's changing? What do we have good evidence on? And then my clinician takes in that information and then therefore changes what's offered to me, because then my value and preference is based on what is offered to me by the clinician.
And what your clinician has said about the evidence. I mean, yes. You cannot have patient autonomy if all of the information has been politicized?
But and then I think there's one more element that just is very challenging in this is that is there risks to a procedure like removing the tonsils of a child? Absolutely. Could a child die under anesthesia? Yes. Could they accidentally cut their vocal cord? Like there's risks. But a risk is more, this could be the potential bad outcome. It's risky. Like, I send my kids to go ride a bike. Is it risky if I send them without a helmet? Yes. But is there a guarantee that if I send them without a helmet, they're going to end up with a head injury? No, it's a risk. But in the protocol of a puberty blocker to immediate cross-sex hormones in a young boy, it's not a risk. It's a known outcome that I'm going to sterilize you. To me, I think the word risk doesn't even match what it is. It's not a risk. It's not, oh, there's a slight potential that 10% of the boys will be sterilized. This is no, we're sterilizing them. Like if that tonsillectomy back in the day when it was still being offered with low quality evidence had the absolute known outcome that it was also going to sterilize all those kids, like I just don't think it wouldn't be on the table.
Someone just said in a chat I'm in that it's illegal to forcibly sterilize children unless it's medically necessary, which gets back to the misuse of that term. But I did not know that. We should fact check that. I mean, that came from a group chat. I'm not. But
Can I
is an issue.
Can I pivot us for a minute?
Pivot away.
Okay. Is there now consensus that the evidence base is low quality, and have we now moved into an ethics question?
Who's we?
I mean,
yes. I don't think
the field, do you think the general public recognizes that there's just no evidence?
I don't think so.
There's no strong evidence.
Okay. That's not known as consensus yet?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, especially because what we were talking about right before we started recording, like with the recent Utah review, like which we haven't really addressed too much, but there was a systematic review that came out that, was that found completely different results than every other systematic review from the CAST review and all these others reviews that have come out regarding these medical interventions. It was like, oh, we did an even, what they said was we did an even broader one. And we came to different conclusions that there are benefits to this, and that so now certain organizations, activists, they're using those, and then people are ingesting that information from that chamber, right?
Does anybody have a good sense of that Utah review?
Well, speaking of SEGM, so we had listeners ask about this as well. Like there are people that have been mentioning it, that there was this systematic review that came out from. So as I understood it, what my guess was, because one of the first things that they touted about this was what was it, University of Utah, is that right? That was a systematic review. I'll have to look it up. Anyway, I'll put this in the show notes. So they came out with a systematic review this past year, and what they said was all these other reviews, I'm paraphrasing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like all these other reviews were like, oh, we did a systematic review of 10 studies, of 20 studies, of 18 studies, of 33. We searched even harder and found even more. And people say there's a dearth of studies about this. Well, we disagree. There's a lot of studies about this. And so we did our systematic review on 100 and whatever studies, right? And we've discovered that there are benefits. We found that there are benefits to these treatments, that you can be said that puberty blockers, lowers rates of depression, anxiety, cross-sex hormones, help gender dysphoria, help anxiety, depression, whatever, improve mental health. And my inclination was, well, the reason why and correct me if I'm wrong again, the reason why systematic reviews that have been done have been fewer studies is because they've had to eliminate the studies where the methodology is so flawed where they cannot like there has to be some kind of substance and credibility to the study. So they're analyzing which studies can be reviewed according to methodology, and then they're taking all of those quality methodologically sound studies and looking at the evidence based on what they found, and then saying, "Oh, well, what the researchers are claiming that they found in the conclusion can't actually be, confirmed by the evidence that they used, et cetera, et cetera." That's my understanding. And as far as I know, and going back to SEGM did have a write-up about this. And Jamie, I think you mentioned that Ben Ryan did as well. But
Yes.
SEGM kind of had that same response, as far as I know, which was my inclination. It kind of like was my gut instinct about the little that what I know about systematic reviews and how they work. Um, of course, I can, you know, um, check all of that and make sure that that's true. What do you guys think?
Well, I'll just say though, so even if let's give Utah the benefit of the doubt right now. Let's just
Mhm.
say that they actually did a quality systematic review of the evidence and they found something different. So then scientifically then what we need to look at also becomes okay, so there's one, but then I'm comparing that to Sweden, Finland, the CAST report, these newer McMaster's reports. I have to still then look at if I'm going to look at all of the systematic reviews, then why do nine say one thing and this one says different? Like, okay, explain to me that we'd have to then look at the evidence of that disconnect.
So if you're saying that, not sorry to cut in, but if you're saying that, then that actually makes the campaign of the trans activists that push back against McMaster even better, even more or like more shrewd, because if there is this one review over here, then they can chip away at the credibility of these by pointing out the hate groups that have funded all of these.
But I still don't think they were going after the actual credibility of McMaster's systematic review of evidence. I think that they were going after it based on how it was used.
No, I do too, and how it was funded. But
Yeah.
that's all people need to know. Like they only need to. I mean, look, if Biden or Obama says one thing, and then Trump says the exact same thing, people are going. It's just things are t become tainted once they become they rub up against the wrong person or institution, organization, ideology, whatever, right? Politics, etc.
Are we gonna, this just feels like it's gonna be a never ending. How many reviews, how many studies do we need until we reach?
We don't need any more studies. We need better arguments.
Can I read also the comment really quickly on SEGM's website about the Utah study, just for listeners who have been asking about this a lot?
Yeah.
I'd
Um,
like to hear it.
yeah, uh, the Utah report, this was, uh, let's see. The review, so May 19th, let's see, although dated August 2024, the report was submitted to the state on May 19th, 2025, and is now publicly available. And it was conducted by the Drug Regimen Review Center at the University of Utah. This is important. At the request of Utah's Department of Health and Human Services to provide the legislature with recommendations to help determine whether to lift the state's moratorium on hormonal interventions for minors with gender dysphoria. So this was like, you know, politically motivated from I mean, I guess what isn't in terms of these, but it was like, okay, we need to know, should we lift this ban? Should we keep it? And so this Utah report, SEGM says it spans over 1,000 pages, states that it provides three main deliverables. One, a list of specific hormonal and hormonally active pharmacological agents routinely used as part of gender transition in minors and their FDA approved uses. In parentheses, all are being used off label for gender dysphoria. Number two, A summary of recent clinical practice guidelines relating to the treatment of gender dysphoria. Number three, evidence tables of systematic reviews and or meta-analyses. It includes a list of studies drawn from existing systematic reviews and clinical guidelines and attempts to assess their quality using the relatively lenient Newcastle-Ottawa scale. However, the Utah report inexplicably stopped short of performing the most essential step of any systematic review, synthesizing the evidence. Without a formal synthesis, ideally using grade, though other transparent methods could suffice, the legislature's central question of whether the provision of hormones and surgeries to gender dysphoric minors is justified remains unanswered. The authors attribute the omission of the evidence synthesis to, quote, insufficient resources, end quote. Yet synthesizing evidence is a core requirement of systematic reviews under PRISMA standards, which they claim to follow. Despite the omission of the critical step of evidence synthesis, the report offers, quote, high-level conclusions, end quote, asserting that the hormonal treatments are safe and effective, in apparent contradiction to existing systematic reviews, which consistently find the evidence to be highly uncertain. And then this is where they say the report authors also appear to conflate the quantity of available studies. And this is kind of what my reaction was. I didn't think about the grade or what SEGM said there. So I was really glad for that clarity in terms of they didn't synthesize the evidence. But it says they appear to conflate the quantity of available studies with the quality or certainty of the evidence. And so, had the authors employed the grade approach to evidence synthesis, they would have recognized that despite the large number of studies claiming benefits, the certainty in those findings remains extremely low due to serious limitations in study design. When experts refer to the dearth of evidence supporting pediatric gender transition, they're not referring to the number of studies, but rather to their low methodological quality and the resulting lack of confidence in the findings. The issue is not the quantity of evidence, it is the profound weaknesses within it. And they go on. There's another thing. They make a highly unusual statement in the executive summary that they do not consider infertility to be an important outcome since, quote, infertility is a known risk of cross-sex hormone therapy, end quote. This position is paradoxical, says SEGM. If infertility were not an important harm to patients, there would be no reason for the significant focus in gender-affirming literature on fertility preservation methods. The very existence of efforts to preserve fertility clearly reflects the recognition that fertility is valuable. Its loss, therefore, is a key harm that must be balanced against the treatment's hoped for benefits. It says it has a number of other irregularities, including failure to include well-known systematic reviews. For example, the NICE, NICE Review and York Reviews, which had already been published by the time the report was produced in 2024, and a surprising and novel decision to redact parts of publicly available scientific details in its study summaries, making it challenging to scrutinize the work. And then
So
their
in a
state,
way,
yeah, go ahead.
it's
Sorry.
more like a literature review than a systematic review. A literature review, which just gathers all the studies and says, here's what they said. And the literature review, by the way, is what's on that Cornell What We Know website, which then they're planning to, they have one for adult trans medicine, and they are planning to do one for pediatric medicine. And they've refused to update to say none of this is evaluated how the quality of any of these studies. This is just a summary of their findings. And as we all know, you can find a study to say anything you want, especially when it comes to gender. If you're looking for just a study with an outcome that you like, that's available to you. But that doesn't tell you if you can make recommendations based on it.
And also to clarify too, in the second comment, they do say, you know, that there is the first part of the report, the Utah report, is a helpful resource because it's the list of drugs currently used for gender transitioning of youth and their current FDA indications. But beyond that, the analysis of the treatment guidelines, systematic reviews, and individual studies falls far short of expected professional standards for a systematic review. And, you know, it's interesting because if I Google, you know, SEGM Utah review, the first hit, thankfully, is just, you know, notable publications, and I get to SEGM. The second one's SEGM Home, About Us. Then the fourth one is queerdoc.com. Utah's Evidence Review on Gender Affirming Care for Youth, May 2025. I'm assuming if this website's called Queer Doc, it's going to be like, oh my God, they found da 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 da. Um, uh, let's see.
Live Googling, everybody.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm sorry. This is probably
No,
barely
no,
for our
I
listeners.
think it's the most exciting listening and watching possible. In fact, I can see that as a whole channel of you. That must exist out there where you
Oh,
just
yeah.
people look stuff up.
So they say, they actually use the words fuck yeah in this Queer Doc assessment of the systematic review. So, yeah, the research shows that medical treatments for transgender young people help with mental health, social well-being, and help their bodies look more like the gender they know themselves to be.
Mm.
The research also shows these treatments are safe. Things like bone strength, heart health, and other body changes stay in the normal ranges. Fuck yeah. So, anyway, I'm just pointing that out because it's just a, what do they call it? Information, it's like what's it called? Where you're like silo, right? Where
Yeah.
everybody has, it's just all this information is siloed and then people kind of get the messages that they really, really do want and need. And because it's messy and it's confusing. And hello, I mean, who what average American? First of all, I never in a million freaking years, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, thought that I would be on a podcast talking about, what I thought about this new systematic review coming out of the University of Utah in 2025. It seemed to me that they weren't, I mean, like, how the freak do I know about these things? You know, it's sad. I shouldn't know more or be able to discern more than the professionals that are providing these treatments or working in these gender clinics, but I really think I do because they're relying on their lived experience, so many of them. Whereas,
Well, there's really nothing magical about being a professional then. You just start doing something over and over, commit yourself to learning about it, and whether you're credentialed or not, this whole idea of an expert is a very modern thing.
that's true.
So
That's
don't
true.
sell yourself short.
No, yeah, I mean, I appreciate that.
Although I will add, my actual master's of science was training into do exactly what you are talking about.
My undergraduate degree from Columbia in nonfiction creative writing was not.
Yeah, but
Well, as you
gotta
guys
read.
as you guys know, my
Your-
degree
Your
was
degree
in
wins.
neo-Marxist theory and experimental feminist video.
Lisa, yours always wins.
Thank you.
I have to go.
Yes,
Dad.
Good time to
let's
wrap up.
go. Let's do recommendations.
Oh my goodness, I forgot, and we forgot to do that last week, Corey, didn't we? Or did we? Oh my gosh.
We
Anyway,
we didn't forget. We chose not to.
who's
Okay,
got
I'm
one?
gonna go. Can I go first and then
Yes.
okay. I finished The Handmaid's Tale, all of it, and I do not recommend watching the last season.
Okay.
Oh, I thought you meant the book.
No, I watched the entire thing, and the last season I was mad at it, and the last episode was terrible.
Okay. So it's big thumbs down to Handmaid's
It's an
Tale for the last season of
anti-recommendation.
Handmaid's Tale. Okay. Lisa, what about you? Do you have anything?
I have been listening to the Lawrence Wright novel. We bring up Lawrence Wright a lot here.
Yeah, we do.
So it turns out on Spotify they have, I mean, this is very bad for those of us who are trying to make a living as a writer, but I didn't realize that they had audiobooks with your premium subscription or whatnot. So I've been listening to the new Lawrence Wright novel, The Human Scale, which takes place in Hebron and in settlements and contested territories between Israel and Palestinians, and it's amazing. And I think the audiobook is particularly amazing because it has more perspectives on that conflict than you will get anywhere. And it's really, really fantastic.
That's cool. He's so smart. I like him. Corey, what about you?
Well, I discovered or I was informed about a new modeling technique that is really fascinating to me. Modeling is when you've got a problem that you're trying to understand, you're trying to deconstruct that problem into smaller pieces and understand it for strategic reasons. This thing called, of course, because of the invisible
Wordly
background here,
maps.
Wordly maps. So these things are called Wordly maps, and I can't show you because of my background, and I'm not going to mess with it. Check out Wordly mapping. Go watch a video on Wordly mapping. It has some of its roots in IT, but there's absolutely no reason why it needs to stay there. It's all for thinking about where you are in relationship to the forces that you need to move and are moved by.
Cool.
Mm.
My recommendation is, I mean, this is a pretty solid recommendation. I just watched, my husband and I just watched episode 3 of Alien Earth on, actually, I guess FX. So we're watching it on Hulu, I think. Anyway, um, we're both huge fans of the Alien franchise, have been for years and years and years. Love it, rewatch it, know it, live it. And this is something they should have done a long time ago, is do a kind of Ridley Scott, who did the famous Alien movies 1 and 2, and then also Covenant and Prometheus. He's an executive producer, so it really has a lot of that feel of the original Alien franchise, which is fun and good. It's not perfect, but it's definitely enjoyable. And it comes up, I mean, it has some interesting ideas too about AI, about the future, about what makes us human, and so on. And then it's got the creepies with all the different violence and all that good stuff. So there you go. Alien Earth.
And where can people sign up for the newsletter, our weekly
Yes.
newsletter?
So
Paid subscribers.
So yeah, so at our Substack at the informeddissent.substack.com, you can upgrade your subscription to be paid. It's really, really appreciated because this is a lot. It does a lot of work that goes into this, and it's great and it's fun. And we're so happy that people are enjoying it, and we're definitely appreciative of the people, of anybody who listens really and has responses for us. But the people that do and are able to and do put forth some funds, it's truly, truly helpful and really means a lot. And so yeah, they can just go to the Substack and upgrade their subscription that way, and the newsletter will come every Friday at 4 p.m. And then otherwise, what else? That's it. I guess you'll see us next week. You can find us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts and so on as well, because our podcast automatically uploads to those forums. And yeah, we'll see you all next week. Thanks for listening.